at Dunbar Cave, and this is a state park?
It's a state park and natural area,
Okay.
managed by the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation's state parks.
And it used to be a hayfield,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys have restored it. It's a 4-year project. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it took to get this hayfield looking like this?
You know, restoration has certain different starting points. This one was an old field / hayfield, but because of that, it had a lot of non-native grasses in it, and that's actually one of the hardest things to restore because it has such a long-lived seed bank of undesirable species in it. So what we did here is we had to first get rid of what was here, and that unfortunately in this case required about 6 to 7 rounds of herbicide use over a 2-year period.
And then came the plants and the seeds?
Yep, we going into that that second year of preparation, we actually were concerned with the degree of slope that we might have some soil erosion problems. So for that, we planted a cover crop of brown top millet.
Tell me a little bit about that process. How did you know which species to plant, and where did you get those seeds and the plants to put in?
Well, we got lucky. So this is part of an ecosystem that is functionally extinct in the sense that 99.9% has been lost.
It's crazy.
To understand what needed to go here, we looked to make sure it was the same ecoregion, the same soil types, same landscape, and then we have published scientific studies that say, okay, for an upland rolling prairie on this kind of soil, these are the species that we theoretically would use. Okay, is there a seed producer that actually has the seeds available for this? So we got lucky. One of the two probably more notable seed companies in eastern United States is Roundstone Native Seed. And they are located in the same ecoregion, 2 hours away. And they had about 55 species between the two lowland and upland mixes that we were able to use completely for this project. Now, a typical native prairie might have 150 species. So there's about another 100 that aren't available in the seed market. And our goal, and what we'll see at our next site, is actually where we can go to a native existing remnant, and we're going to hand collect those species, and eventually our volunteers will add them to this restoration. So we'll take it from 55 species up to 155 species in time.
And will you go and collect that seed and then come right here and plant it, or will it go to Roundstone first and enter into propagation?
Well, we are working with Roundstone, trying to get seeds that can go from hand harvest to the market. In this case, what we're going to do is we're solely concerned with collecting native local genotype to go back and enhance our restoration sites. And so for that, we won't need Roundstone for that part. Our volunteers will hand collect and then hand clean at our seed bank facility at Austin P and back at our headquarters. And then in the wintertime, we'll have sort of a mixing party where we might mix 40 species together for the upland dry mix. We'll bring those out in the middle of winter, usually before a snowstorm or rainstorm, and we'll interseed or overseed that. So those seeds basically will fall right down into the cracks and crevices between clumps of grass just like this. And it'll take numerous attempts at interseeding and overseeding to basically before they begin to incorporate themselves. But they're adapted to that. That's what they've evolved to do. And so we expect, based on models in Chicago and elsewhere, that's a really great and proven methodology.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we're at a remnant prairie site now in Kentucky.
Right.
And tell us a little bit about where we are and why remnants are so important.
Yeah, we're at Baker Prairie Natural Area, which is a small municipal park here in Russellville, Kentucky. So it's a small town, but it's in the heart of this beautiful crescent-shaped plain that historically it was about 220 miles long. So all that's mostly been totally erased. And what has survived after 2.5 centuries of American progress is just bits and pieces and scraps.
This was kind of like, what were the clues here left behind? It was actually something that was still intact enough that could give you a a picture of the bigger landscape, right?
Right. So when I as a botanist, when I go out to a site, one way I can recognize a prairie remnant as opposed to just a hayfield or a meadow is I'm looking for diversity.
Yeah.
So if you look back here behind you, you can see bits of color. Here it is,
Yep.
mid-May. You can see bits of color, but you can also see a lot of structure.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to really go into that, what we'd find is it's not all just a green abyss, but
Yeah.
rather there's probably about 40 species just between, an area that's probably about 100 square meters.
Wow. And did you come and hand collect seed from here as well?
We have. So these remnants are especially important for collecting seeds
Yeah.
from the local native species. So we bring our volunteers here. We have permits to do so, and we hand collect at certain times through the year. Those seeds get cleaned, and then they go back onto restoration sites like Google and Dunbar Cave
Mm-hmm.
that are in the same ecoregion.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And so now, moving into some of the final thoughts, do you think that we are pushing against the tide, or do you think we're turning the corner?
I think that the message for so long has been forest conservation, wetland conservation, stream and clean water conservation. All of those are great.
Mm-hmm.
And in our organization, we love clean water, we love forests. But there's been this forgotten element, and that's the grasslands of the Southeast
Mm-hmm.
and the grasslands of Eastern North America in general. There's been so much momentum building that I think the inertia now is carrying it in a place where people recognize that these once occurred on the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
There's something romantic about the aspect of these vast prairies once covering
Mm-hmm.
giant swaths of states like Virginia, Maryland, Kentucky, Alabama. And now that we realize they were here, and
Mm-hmm.
we've been advocating so strongly that they were here, now we have to figure out how to rebuild them.
Yeah.
And so that multifaceted approach of some of it's got to be working with private farmers on how to make pastures work, right?
Yeah.
Some of it's working with solar companies to make sure, like, how can we put prairies underneath the solar panels?
Yep.
In other cases, it's working with billionaire philanthropists to say, you know what, I don't mind paying $10,000 an acre to preserve a piece of land that's going to have houses built on it, unless I don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to have these diverse strategies
Yeah.
to be able to save these sites.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're also missing out because a lot of these, to really truly restore them or recreate them, depends on having the seeds.
Yeah.
And for so many regions of the Southeast and the Eastern U.S. in general, we still don't have the seeds.
What kind of, beyond this overrepresentation on forests and
Mhm.
American conservation, what are some other ideas or practices that have strongholds that are kind of outdated that we maybe need to move away from, and maybe we need to adapt our thinking to 21st century needs? What do you think they might be?
I think one is the lack of investment in, and I'm not sure this is outdated, it just hasn't been done much, but the lack of investment in the infrastructure to do this level of ecological restoration.
Yeah.
It has to be prioritized.
Yeah.
There's a few that stand out. One is the belief that trees cure all, that trees and green equals good, right? So I won't call out any specific agency, but let's just say there's a very prominent federal agency that still believes that planting trees to restore wetlands is the only approach. We need to battle against that, because what we find is happening is trees are being planted extremely densely in former grasslands.
Yeah.
So areas that were supporting grassland birds just a decade ago, today they're so dense and thick, they're basically biological deserts.
Wow.
And it's just a complete lack of understanding of the need. And I think what we need to listen to is the land and what the history of that land says about it. If we can dig deeper and dig beyond just the species present, but understand the cultural history and what early settlers said about it, that should have more of a guiding role into what we're doing with that land today. Not some regulation that says all wetlands need to be planted as forested wetlands.
Yeah, I agree. So then, just to conclude, I want to ask you, what has been kind of some of the most challenging or difficult aspects of this work, and then equally what has surprised you or been most rewarding?
I think some of the most challenging is patience. I have a deep was Aldo Leopold wrote about the penalty of an ecological education.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fact that I've been doing this since age 12,
Mm-hmm.
I know every single species of plant
Mm-hmm.
in this site. And they all speak to me, just like I will probably remember your face or Rick's face. Friends, right? These are my friends, and it pains me to see my friends dropping out of the landscape.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're speaking to me when wild quinine over there is dropping out left and right. So there's a patience that comes with seeing these things be obliterated on a daily basis. Waking up some days feeling tired and worn out and burnout, but also knowing that if our organization doesn't do it, and if I don't get out of bed to help do it, these places will vanish. I think that's been the thing, is learning that patience and trying to overcome the sadness that comes with seeing these sites disappear. In terms of the most rewarding aspects, is just seeing what started out as just an attempt to make a local difference, to give my kids a place to see a grassland in their own community. We had to drive here. In fact, my daughter Anna's golden hair was right out in that prairie.
Aww.
But I shouldn't have to drive 30 miles. But I think one of the things I'm most excited about is what started as a local effort to restore one prairie for kids of our community. All of a sudden, a bunch of people seized on that. And they're like, man, we were so inspired by this message. Can you do it in our community? Can you do it here? And then we had a philanthropist from New York City who discovered us as we were having this conversation. And he said, you know, we've been investing in the savannas of Africa now for decades. And what I'm realizing is this is like the American Serengeti. He said, so what role can private philanthropy play? And I think what transpired after that was, with their funding, it enabled us to carry our message beyond the local community to the entire eastern United States. Well, specifically a 24-state region.
Wow.
And what we're seeing now is thousands of people are hungry for this message.
Wow.
Because they realize, just like I did, that the penalty of an ecological education it's sad. And now what they're able to see is that we're able to really expand this across a great area. That's the thing that gives me hope. We've created a movement.
Yeah, you definitely have, and I'm so happy that I get to witness this firsthand and see you in your glory out here in these prairies. I can feel the passion.
Cool.
And it's awesome. So thank you so much.
Well, maybe when we're in our 60s, we can look back and remember the days when we stood out here together. And I'd like to say, in 3 years, we've created 100 acres of new, diverse prairie.
Wow.
I'd like to say by the time I'm, retired, that we've created thousands of acres. I believe it's going to happen.
I do too. I really do. Yeah. And I think it's all about getting the tools in place and the resources in place, because I think we have that.
Yeah.
We have the capacity. We just need to bring it all together.
Got to bring it all together.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about collaboration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dwayne.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Cool.